Right, Alan Quinlan is back from his trip. How was it?
It was excellent, Jerry. Yeah, it was superb.
Were you there when the chicken was being stolen at the end?
No, I wasn't. I was gone home. I was actually in that bar about maybe an hour before that, and
It looked like they were having a good time.
yeah, they were. I was surprised. It was. I'm not surprised, but I was surprised maybe that all the New Zealanders, the All Blacks, were out as well. I know you have to have a few beers and you can't kind of wallow at home, but they were all seemed to be mixing and getting on fine.
Yeah,
and,
I did see some Justin Marshall footage as well later on where he was getting into it with some of the All Blacks.
Yeah, that was a Ger and Eoin, which was I wasn't there for it. I was actually I went to the team hotel to meet Justin Marshall and Jeff Wilson because they were working with Sky, and we'd kind of collaborated on a few pieces for Sky New Zealand, Sky UK and Ireland as well, and so we'd been together a fair bit over the tour. So I went and met them there. It was a quiet little kind of hotel bar off, just a block or two off the beaten track. That there was no passing traffic there. Nobody really knew about it. The players were obviously in a way in their own kind of private room, and then they went out on the town, if you like. But so I was there about maybe 1:30, 2 o'clock, and with the Sky New Zealand guys, and we walked up to that bar. So I was with Justin Marshall for a good while before that, and I actually left my bag back in the hotel when I went into that bar. Mishmash it was called, and in Courtney Place in Wellington, and I went back to get my bag, and then I came back to the nightclub bar, whatever it was, and I just kind of decided against. I said it was around 3:30 in the morning. I had an early start. I was keen to see a little bit of I needed to get packed up anyway and stuff like that. So I went back to the hotel, and then I saw that the next day. But I don't know what happened. I think it was just a few verbals. But I kind of, when I'm on the other side now, on the media side, I kind of feel that if I was in Justin Marshall's position of maybe critiquing his home team, like maybe I would have had to do, and talk about the disappointment of the losses, maybe that filters back to some of the New Zealand players as well. And I probably have experienced a little bit of that before when I criticised Munster, or if I criticised Ireland or something like that, which is, I feel a little bit for him because
he was doing his job.
Well, you can say 9 good things, Ger, about,
no one hears
about
them.
A team, and you say one bad thing and everybody hears it. And I think Ger and Eoin would have been probably. It's a little bit like the Roy Keane, Paul Pogba stuff, or them making these Instagram videos and stuff. When you're winning, you can make any sort of videos or kind of, but when you're losing, and I think it reflects badly on Ger and Eoin being the hard man at 4 o'clock in the morning, giving verbals to a guy who's a very good commentator,
doing his job.
And maybe he'd have been better advised to have verbals with Peter O'Mahony or Caelan Doris or Josh van der Fleer, because they totally outplayed him. And look, that's at the end of the day, I think Savea and Eoin actually did okay for the All Blacks in that third test. He got a very good try, Eoin, I think, but he's not a regular on the All Blacks team, and that doesn't mean you can't tell someone what you think of him, but I just think it reflects a little bit worse on him.
Do it in the morning in the cold light of day.
Yeah, or do it at one of the training sessions, a media event or something, and when you're interviewed, say, I'm not impressed with what he's saying or whatever. But anyway, look, things happen with a few beers on board, and I was kind of surprised that they were all there. I think they had a curfew to kind of leave. Maybe the curfew was 4 o'clock in the morning. It was a late curfew, but I was surprised, given, you're in New Zealand, you've just lost a series, and the New Zealand public are pretty vocal and opinionated about their team, and they're not used to losing. So I'm not sure I would have been in that situation myself. I probably would have been ducking away, hiding somewhere for having a few beers.
Were they good losers?
Yeah, I think they were. They were very gracious in Wellington. I think there was a few issues in Dunedin that I spoke to you about. Again, I even said that to Justin Marshall and Jeff Wilson when we were chatting, and they were kind of saying, look, it's a lot of students, a lot of guys maybe not affiliated to rugby clubs. They're just off for a bit of a party, and so it was a minority who kind of were a bit rude and stuff at that game in Dunedin. Not to me, but to some of the Irish supporters. But the people in Wellington were And by and large, they were very, very, very gracious and complimentary of what Ireland achieved. And I think Ireland gained unbelievable respect with the performances.
What do you think about them sacking some of the backroom team? It always feels a bit to me like
Scapegoats.
Who picked them in the first place?
Yeah, you either stick together or you go together, I think. And that's. But look, sometimes if the dynamic is not right, and it's always a danger of coaches bringing in pals or friends or guys they've worked well with before. Rugby changes a lot. The game keeps evolving, and probably the Northern Hemisphere has probably shown that to the Southern Hemisphere, and it's probably the biggest wake-up call for them that this X-factor brilliance or natural ability, there needs to be more to it than now, because the game is it's a real science now. Sometimes it's quite boring to watch, but recently we've seen, and those test series in the summer's shown that it can be very, very, very exciting as well. So I think it was John Plumtree and I just think it's the two coaches going for the All Blacks is a little bit. But maybe the people who'll come in, Jason Ryan has come in, I know he's highly thought of as the forwards coach in the Crusaders, and the New Zealand forwards looked to lack a bit of cohesion and understanding and implement any sort of force against Ireland in that second and third test. And if you look at Ireland scoring 2 maul tries, and I know that from being a forward before, it's kind of like front row's being pushed back in a scrum. It's you're being beaten by the opposition pack when the opposition are scoring maul tries. So I think they've jumped straight away and said our forwards are not performing well enough. Maybe they're not being coached well enough. And this guy, Jason Ryan, has done a really good job for the Crusaders. And of course, there's a number of Crusaders forwards there, Whitelock.
So it might work out, but it's not a great sign.
No, well, it's a sign that it's an admission that there's problems there.
What we did is probably walk ourselves into a bit of trouble here this morning, Alan.
I hate this.
We've done this before. We've talked about combined sides. So I think maybe we should give ourselves a little bit of a shield here. If you'd picked a combined team after the first test, how many Ireland players would there have been in it?
3, 4. There would have been 11 or 12 New Zealanders. And that was based probably on about 15 minutes of absolute brilliance where they just blew Ireland away. And they were ruthless in the tries they scored. I think the 6 tries they scored in that first test, and I've probably said it numerous times, and this was probably maybe the problem for New Zealand. At least 4 of them were preventable, and that sounds a little bit arrogant in saying that, but I think when you review it, they were probably soft tries for Ireland to give up, and that's probably the week of that second test. I think Andy Farrell and all the players, and I know from kind of listening to what they were saying and their body language, they really believed that they could fix some of the issues, and maybe New Zealand thought, well, the same is going to happen again. We're going to have individual brilliance that's just going to blow Ireland away, and we'll up the tempo, and we'll keep the scoreboard just out of reach for Ireland. And but there was a number of New Zealand players played really well. Scott Barrett was brilliant in that first test, and I think he was a loss for him in
the third test.
Yeah,
definitely
a big loss. And I think obviously moving into the second round, Whitelock missing the kind of took a line-out option and took him out of the back row, even though, traditionally he's a second row. But, if you go to the second and third test, then, being respectful, I think the reality is that Ireland were pretty dominant in both those matches. I think the 15-20 minute period after half-time in the third test was Ireland were under the cosh, and when it came back to 25-22 with Will Jordan's try, you think trouble. But it just goes to show how mentally strong Ireland were.
That's the best
field.
Part about it.
Yeah, I think that was the most pleasing thing for people. But and then some of the defence at the end, because that's stuff that you can really, really build on, and they didn't get it easy. So picking a combined team is risky territory. I think we did it a few years ago, but it's based on kind of the most recent results.
It's not forever. No.
Yeah, it's
It's not like
it's kind of stupid in some ways, in a sense that
It's
you know
totally-
there's
yeah.
only you're splitting hairs between certain players and a little bit of form at a period of time, and
just for all our New Zealand viewers, and hello to you all. After the first test, the only Irish players who you would have had in were Sheehan, Furlong, Josh van der Fleer, and James Lowe. 11 All Blacks, and you could have had a row about some of those as well. But anyway, after the third test, where we've just created
yeah, and if I
history-
just clarify that, you know, Ty Furlong was under a bit of pressure. The scrum wasn't perfect, but I just thought his play around the field. I just thought Sheehan was incredible for all those games. He's just non-stop,
Yeah.
and he's one of those kind of incredible footballers. He's a stepper. He's pace. He's acceleration. Phenomenal player. Josh van der Fleer for me in all three tests was sensational.
if he stays fit for the rest of the year, he has to be World Player of the Year.
Yeah, for
Very
sure.
close to it.
I think his form was just incredible. And even in that first test, tackle after tackle after tackle after jackal at the breakdown, support play, hunting on the inside, you know, carries, and just the level of performance. James Lowe was on the wing in that after the first test. Did James Lowe have a brilliant game in the first test? Probably not. He didn't do anything wrong, but Fenga and Nuku didn't really do much for New Zealand either. So again, you know, you kind of, that's a tricky one, and that's no disrespect. James Lowe was brilliant in Test 2 and Test 3, as were all the Irish players.
Can I just ask a quick question? Why does James Lowe not take all of the penalties that we have with his big left boot? Why does he not just kick the touch? Like, why are we still letting Sexton do it? Just give your leg a rest there. This guy's he's got a cannon. Just let him do it. Because he does it sometimes. Randomly, they'll throw him the ball and he'll kick it and it goes miles. And then other times you're like, just give it to him.
Yeah, he punts it a mile up the field, doesn't he? I think the accuracy part, and Johnny's probably missed one or two to touch in the last couple of years,
Yes.
and sometimes he looks a little bit fatigued. But
Yes. And look, with this is
still,
take a little rest.
he's kicking is still fine. But I think maybe out of your own half, maybe if you want to really go lamp it for distance.
Which, you know, he can do. Like, he's one of the longest kickers of a ball I've seen in any sport.
For you, is that fair enough? 11-12 New Zealanders
Yeah,
after
totally.
Test 1.
Absolutely.
They win by pretty dominant scoreline. I think Ireland's performance in the second half was heartening. They were held up over the line 4 or 5 times. The Yardi Sevilla try, you'd say, is preventable. It's brilliant out of him. He's
Well,
an
the
incredible
referee,
player.
yeah.
and Sawakula try after scrum, again, preventable. Peter O'Mahony and the referee Carl Dixon probably, you know, got their... Peter O'Mahony wasn't happy that he thought Carl Dixon blocked him. Of course, he didn't do that intentionally, but you just look at the tries and the scores and think they're preventable. And I just thought the heart and the kind of effort out of the team in the second half gave them some hope.
Okay, so I'm going to flip it the other way. So Geordie Barrett makes it, Sever Reece makes it, Ardy Sevilla makes it, and is that it? Is there 3? Is it 12? 3?
For the...
4.
Oh, Will Jordan, yeah.
And Will Jordan, yeah.
Will Jordan is one of the greatest rugby players. He's
hard
so
to
great
see.
to watch, isn't he?
He really only had that
try. Yeah.
But because he's so good, when you look at him, it's hard to leave him out of any team. So I just think, you know, and then Robbie Henshaws at 13, Gary Ringrose, you know, if he played the first test, he could be. I think they had a big problem with their midfield in the 3 tests. Although Rico Ioane probably saved 2 tries. I don't know if you remember that period where he tackled Joey Carberry over the line. They looked at it, thought it was a seatbelt tackle. I think he held up another Irish player. He saved 2 tries in that first test. I think he's a winger. Quinn Tupaya scored a try from the kick through from Bowden Barrett in that first test. I think midfield is a problem for him. David Havili had COVID before the first test. He was probably going to start at 12. But I think it's an issue. So I think 2 of the Irish, you know, Henshaw, Ringrose and Aki, 2 of them go in there. You know,
Oh, well, I
out of
think
that 3.
Yeah, and that's the backs, and obviously Sexton played his best ever games for Ireland.
And if
Did
you look
he-
at Geordie Barrett at full back, Hugo Keenan was absolutely brilliant. But you've just got this freak of Geordie Barrett. He's a phenomenal player, and I think they probably would be better off trying to play him at 12. So again, that's unfair. Sevu Reece, that second test, I think he made 3 tackles in one kind of phase and 2 turnovers in the space of about a minute. He's just kind of one of those outlandish players as well. So
Tygburn-esque.
yeah.
But you've picked the whole pack apart from Artie Surveyor, and no one could complain about that because our pack was completely dominant in the third test.
Do you know what? Anyone who's going to criticise this online or make comments or whatever, I'm fine with that. Tell me who else should be in here based on test 2 and 3. So should Sam Kane be in there ahead of Josh van der Fleer? No. Should
Whitelock?
Well, Dalton Papali'i started at 6 in the second test, and then Ger and Eoin started at 6 in the third test. So should either of them be there ahead of Peter O'Mahony based on the
not on this test series?
2 or 3? No. Artie Sevilla.
This isn't a team that's ever going to play. This is an all-star team at the end of the season.
Artie Sevilla over Caelan Doris. I thought Caelan Doris was brilliant in test 2 or 3. You asked me about the performance in 1. He wasn't.
Well, he was on the verge of being dropped.
He wasn't that prominent, and I think in test 2 and 3 he was outstanding. He showed what kind of a footballer, and the carries, the pace. He can run at full pace and just step someone going into contact, and he gets through that little gap. But Artie Sevilla is just a freak in the best way possible. I think he'd 19 carries in that third test, and 2-3 players hanging off him. He nearly dragged the All Blacks back into the game.
There was one thing that I haven't talked about on air yet. There was footage on one of the Instagram accounts of the Irish players at the end getting their photographs. The players the fans who stayed at the stadium asking the Irish players to take photographs, and eventually Sexton, give me the phone. But Artie Sevilla is over like bloodied. This is like at the end still getting his photograph taken and taking the phone off people and going, yeah, okay, no problem. I'll still post for photographs even though we've just made bad history here. He seems like a top man.
Yeah, it seems so. And I think they were obviously they were very disappointed, but I think he was the one that could really walk around with his kind of head held high because he was so involved in everything.
Yeah.
James Ryan Tygburn, the second row. Sam Whitelock didn't really see him in that third test, and Brodie Retallick, up to the point that he went off again, they weren't really doing anything. So I think James Ryan was outstanding in the third test and in test 2 as well. So and then of course Tygburn, what he did at the end with the turnovers and the big moments in the game.
Who's on your shortlist for player of the series?
I would say you could pick 3 or 4 easily who were. It's probably unfair. Like, I think Dan Sheehan, Tygburn, Van der Fleer, O'Mahony, Sexton for what he did, Hugo Keenan. There's about 6 there that just slightly edge ahead of the others.
Yeah. And who would your player of the tournament have been then?
It's tricky. I'd love to watch back the matches again and kind of go through them with a fine-tooth comb, but I think it'd be between Sheehan, Van der Fleer and O'Mahony. I probably would save Josh Van der Fleer given his high level of performance all the way through in each 80 minutes.
Even in defeat, yeah. Martin Connell's been in touch on YouTube to say, good man Quinny, you did a great job tracking the news over in New Zealand. You got plenty of thumbs up and cheers walking up and down the steps in the cake tin. You spoke well in the breakdown too on Sky. And then it's whatever those symbols are. Thumbs up, basically. So you've won a legion of new fans.
You usually get too many compliments, but anyway.
Not from New Zealand anyway.
No, they were very good, I think, because I did go on the breakdown on a Sunday night, and they were trying to press me and think, are Ireland going to win next week in the second test? And I was, what I really believed, Ger, was that they would be a lot better and they would run them close. I think you were trying to get it out of me that it was going to be a disaster, and it
felt that it could go either way.
It felt after the Maori one and the first one, this is going to be a long tour. But I think when you're on the ground, and it's kind of hard to explain, when you watch training, when you see the players, when you listen to the press conferences and you feel a little bit of energy, it's kind of strange. Some people will say that doesn't make any difference, but I think the psychology in sport makes a difference when you're kind of back. Of course it does. And I just thought Ireland really kind of had probably looked at the video, were frustrated with some of the decisions that went against them, and
well, O'Mahony's post-match interview was unbelievably positive after the first one, and I was very taken aback by it. But he was like, "We're right in this," and at the time, before in the heat of that moment, you're like, "We weren't though. We just got slaughtered." But actually, he knew that they'd been held up over the line.
It does make a difference that they'd a lot of these guys have beaten New Zealand a number of times in the last few years. So
that was the difference, maybe between
the second half was the key. I thought the easy thing to do would be, and probably we expected it at half time, this is going to get nasty and ugly in the second half. But Ireland, I know they still lost the game. I think it was 32-17, but Gary Ringrose's try, Bundy Aki's try, and then the amount of times in possession and the amount of times they were held up over the line gave them belief that if we fixed the scrum issues, and a couple of line-out issues, and probably a couple of kicks that they put into the backfield where they didn't manage their kicking game as well, I think they felt really that they would have a great chance in the second test. And the impressive thing for me was, because I think the great thing about winning the third test is there was kind of reasons to say, well, the sending off, the yellow cards, that affected New Zealand, and we kind of got the luck on the night. And we did get a little bit of a bounce of the ball here and there, but I just thought that third test, that first half and the third test, unbelievable. The kick chase, Ger, the organisation.
They were savage.
I didn't mention Robbie Henshaw and Tyg Furlong, but I tell you, the tackles that those guys put in. And when you're there and you're kind of looking down and you see the work rate of some of the players, like Robbie Henshaw made some incredible reads there that stopped the likes of Sevu Reece getting the ball or Bowden Barrett getting on the outside channel. I think from that 50-22 that Peter O'Mahony did in the second test, Richie we lost that line out. I think it went over the top. They tried to move it straight away, and Bowden Barrett gave this kind of wide overs pass, which means the pass is going to your outside and it's going to cross you, and he was swerving to get outside the defender. Robbie Henshaw made this incredible read, man ball, tackles. Sevu Reece comes in and tackles one of the Irish players
through
past the ruck. 3 points to Ireland. It's moments like that.
Well, that got a try at the other end.
If Robbie Henshaw's not switched on, he's not such an intelligent, brilliant defender with a wonderful work rate, they could be gone into the field.
All right. Well, I hope your social media is fine after this. I think it will be. I think they're not in any position yet to come after you, but they'll save it for next year or the World Cup quarter final.
Well, that's the thing, and I look back at the team and we think maybe this will all happen again, and we end up playing them in the World Cup quarter-final or France if we get out of the group and if we beat Scotland. And will we have the disappointment? But this tour was incredible, and they deserve massive credit. And I think Andy Farrell got the mood right each week, and his coaches, they were absolutely brilliant.
No, very impressive character. Quinny, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Cheers.